I often feel sorry for presenters that present after lunch. You know, we call it the graveyard shift, and the audience then become very non-responsive. But I think, thank you so much to Maurice Kuman and to Dr. Moses Malani for being here and presenting your take on what inclusive education should look like in South Africa. So I don't know if there's any burning questions. Yes. And that's why I want to open up the floor, because I also have a couple of burning questions. Yes, we'll start with Emil. Emil, would you like to say something?
There's a microphone coming your way.
Thank you very much for those two questions, those two presentations. I really appreciate it. And apologies for not attending the whole presentation, especially to Maurice Kuman as well. I think presentation was so relevant and eye-opening as well, and especially when it comes to the work that we do, especially in the part of inclusive education. So I will make a couple of comments and also ask a question. One of the things that I want to elaborate on is the fact that I don't know if you said it already, but actually last week was actually the 30th celebration of the Salamanca Statement, and in fact I was actually invited to attend that ceremony in Paris, but unfortunately I had the wedding to attend to, so I couldn't make it. But anyway, that was very interesting. And another thing as well, we talk about the UNCRPD, but what we need to remember is that the UNCRPD was written by persons with disabilities for persons with disabilities. And you need to understand that, and I understand Article 24 and all those things that was said on policy level, and of course, you know, we can refer to the White Paper 6. But if you can understand from where it comes from, where persons with disabilities needed to vote, needed to get the vote from officials in the United Nations building. And one fundamental member of the UNCRPD, Richard Reeser, who's actually General Secretary of the Commonwealth Disabled People's Forum, needed to go in his wheelchair, and he needed to basically get a number of signatures. I think he needed to get 72 signatures in order for this to be accepted. And I think when it comes to this policy, it's basically a very important policy for us to be able to understand the true value of inclusion. But I think I want to ask two questions for Maurice Kuman as well. The one thing is, do you think, when you think about inclusive education, don't you think, especially referring to university, don't you think we need to think about more about transformative education? And the reason why I'm saying this is because we're referring to myself as a neurodiverse adult, and also different persons with disabilities, that child becomes an adult, and that adult needs to contribute towards society, needs to function as independent or semi-independently, and also needs to be able to learn the fundamental skills in order for them to cope with different society, to cope with the changes. And secondly, I've had a meeting last week with a government official from New Zealand. And when we celebrated Persons with Disabilities Day last year, the New Zealand government actually voted that all learners with disabilities will be included in a mainstream education system, and that no specialist education system will exist within that country. And it was voted by the government. And I want to ask, what is your opinion on this, especially in a country like New Zealand? And is it, what is your opinion with regards to this model, to the South African model? Thank you.
Yeah, this is probably asking me. This is I suppose you're coming to the heart of the question. And the main question is, can a country run two systems in parallel? And I think that I also attended a very inspirational session a week ago or so about studies done in New Zealand and in Australia, where people said you cannot run a special school system benignly next to an inclusive system. Because as long as there are special schools where children get referred, the bulk of the teacher population don't take responsibility for inclusive education. That's the one part. The second part is that the budgets of wealthy countries can't afford parallel systems, let alone a country like South Africa. So somewhere a special school system has a way of just draining the funds instead of getting a transfer of funds to support the mainstream. That's one part. But having said that, I'm not saying that we are in a position where we can now close special schools, because in many cases those are very valuable resources, and you don't want to lose the resources that you have. So you've got to see how are you going to use those resources more effectively. What I'm hearing here happening in many parts of the country is that some of the funding is now going to making special schools resource centres and getting them to train mainstream schools. I think it looks as if it's working quite well in the autism sector, that ordinary schools where there are children who are neurodiverse get outreach training from the special schools. But it's not happening on a big enough scale. And I think it's something that we will have to look at as a country. I think we have a lot of systems in the mainstream. As Dr. Simelane was explaining, a lot has happened over 20 years. This is a big system. We have more than 12.5 million children in school. It's a big system. We have many schools, and we can't overnight rock the boat. But I do think we've got to see change happening faster, and we've got to invest more in forcing schools to keep children there. We can't keep on referring children, even with mild and moderate disabilities, out of the system, is what I feel. I'm not talking about complex disabilities. We know that they are sometimes low incidence. But as I said when I spoke, it pains me that children who are neurodiverse, children even with what you call it, dyslexia. I mean, the most ridiculous reasons for referring children out of the mainstream. It shouldn't happen. It should stop, and we should have more capacity in the mainstream. And New Zealand is much advanced, but they're also battling the same issue. Thanks.
Tim, we had the lady there at the back, yeah. Just sit there. There's a microphone. Oh, okay.
I'm great authoring.
It's just for the purposes of the
thank you for the presentation. So I've just been to India, and they are grappling with a population of over 1.4 billion people. So the last comment, I'm not convinced. My colleague, Johnson, and I have just done a manuscript on a 30-year reflection of inclusive education, sort of mirroring the 30 years of democracy, 30 years of the Salamanca statement. And it's actually quite a depressing piece if you look at how much talk there's been and how little is translated into classroom practice. We're sharing the manuscript training in Eastern Cape, full service, special and autism specific schools. I've got a son on the autism spectrum. I identify as a parent practitioner. I work with Professor Pasha here in the Department of Inclusive Education at UNISA. And it pains me. I mean, my son's been to 8 different schools. And every day when he comes home, he's now at an autism-specific school. He can tell me about all the movies that they watched for that day. And so, I'm so aware of how the intentions of policy have not really found traction. I offer my services on your task team free of charge. Because I do think that parents and Marie have always been such an incredible inspiration to me, because, you know, we know the policies, we know what should happen, and yet we're also parent practitioners who experience the struggle and who can articulate it. And, you know, I always say to my husband, from the time we sort of noticed our son's developmental delays, it was probably about 16 or 17 months. And I said to him, this is not just going to be about us. We are privileged and we have to not just think about our self-interest, but, you know, the community around us and other parents who have. And today I took energy, I must be honest, I thought I was going to slip out and fetch my son at school and leave early today, but I could not, because I just felt a renewed sort of camaraderie with the parents here who have nothing to gain. You know, the people who have come here are probably going to be okay. But for me, this is an issue of how I see Ubuntu. That it's not just about my son. It's about the community that we should see ourselves as part of, you know, in our South African context. So, Dr. Simonani, here I am, I'm free of charge, I'd love to be on the task team. And every day, you know, we're writing about 136, we're teaching it. We've got this huge group of postgraduate programs. We've just started a new honors with 17 specialization, inclusive education is one. We've got over 300 students. Last night we did our first online weekly lecture. And I find myself like raging. I'm scolding these students in the first lecture last night because, you know, I'm so desperate to see change in practice. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Mary, just before you go, I just want to ask Dr. Simonani, you know, we've been advocating for inclusive education, and when often I attended the education Lahotla, inclusive education has only been spoken in terms of special schools. It has never made reference to mainstream schools. And I'm glad that you said in terms of the ICT rollout that it's been rolled out to special schools, but we also want to hear that it's been rolled out into mainstream schools for children with disabilities. My question to you is, what do you tell a mom? We are now towards the end of March. I still have parents who regularly phone me whose children are still out of school. How do you answer a mom who calls you and says, I can't get my child into a school. All I'm being done is sent from pillar to post from one educational psychologist to another for my child to be assessed before my child can even be placed. So now she waits for an appointment for an educational psychologist and gets put on a waiting list. So a child doesn't get assessed. So now a child is sitting at home where it should be that if we are aiming to leave no one behind, that child should have already been placed in the school while we wait for the assessment to be done so that we can adequately assess of what that child's needs are going to be. How do I answer a mum who has now been to about 6 schools and has been told the same thing? Sorry, we can't take your child in. Number 1, we don't have place. Number 2, we're first waiting for the educational psychologist report.
Thank you very much for the question. I think I need to start from acknowledging the frustration from parents, having to move the length and breadth of the country looking for schools for their children, when in actual fact, this is not supposed to be a burden that is left with parents. According to our CS policy, a parent needs to take his or her child to the nearest school for admission. Then it is up to the school working together with the district, because that's where you will find these specialists who can do the assessment. But whilst that is happening, and this is the directive and the guidance that we've given to all districts and to all schools, and when we do the training on the implementation of the CS policy, we say, take the child first to the school, whilst looking for the experts or specialists that are going to assess for proper placement. This thing of putting learners on a waiting list, it's something that we have always discouraged. But the thing is, in reality, this is happening. So I may suggest that whenever you are confronted by parents who have been struggling to get their children into school, please do not waste any time. Contact us at Basic Education. You are free to even write an email to me and say, we have got this case, we've got this child, this parent has been struggling to get the child into school. And then leave that upon us. We receive this request, I think, on a weekly basis. And we've been trying to do our best to help the parents to get their children to school. We are available, and I am here even committing the department to say, even at the national office, although we don't want to skip all the levels, but we can't let parents, we can't stand and watch parents being frustrated, looking for spaces for their children.
Thank you, Dr. Manuza. And I pray that leaving here today, you will take a more commitment into see, how do we better the educational outcomes for children with Down syndrome? What training has been done to upskill teachers from ECD right through into primary school level? Thank you.
I just wanted to say, I wanted to challenge you a bit, in the sense that assessing a child with Down syndrome by a psychologist serves no purpose. We know they fall within a certain category of intellectual impairment, and I don't know whether any professional assessment is going to add any value. So all you do when you say to schools, wait for someone to assess him, you're giving them leeway not to teach the child. I think there's enough space in our policies to get the teacher to take the child and start teaching him and realizing he learns at a different level. There's enough knowledge out for the teacher to reach the full spectrum. Why should it be implied that the child must be referred? I just feel if a school wants more information on Down syndrome, they can get that, but not a psychologist. That's just a total waste of a psychologist's time.
Thank you. We're going to take our last question because we are running over the program. Mary, just you wanted to ask something?
No, I didn't want to, I wasn't going to ask a question. I was just going to tell Dr. Sibilan.
They're bringing you the microphone?
Yeah.
As much as you are encouraging us parents that we work with you, it is so difficult with the schools, because just last week I went to a school in the south of Johannesburg. The parent asked me to accompany them because this school, they want this child to be out of the school. The child is ADHD. And I was told I have no business to come with this parent at the school. And when I told them the reason I was there, I'm just there to come and listen, because the child is on the autism spectrum. And you know, I had to really stand my ground. Otherwise, they could not have listened to me. Another issue that is Melanie is that we talk about teachers who have been trained on the CS policy, who have been trained on autism, but you go to the school, like the very same school that I'm talking about, they're telling me they cannot work with the child because they have not been trained. The issues that Marie had brought up here, like all the 10, more than 10 excuses, then you know, I've got 39 children in my class, so you want me to concentrate on this one learner, and yeah, it's just too frustrating. Yeah. What I'm going to ask you to do, and that is Melanie, please let your schools know that the children should be in the mainstream school. Because when we go to the school and say the child should stay in the school, we are told we are not specialized, we are not what, we are not what. And the parents are too scared to stand up for their children. So that is why we have so many children out of school, because there's so many excuses. So please help us. I do always refer, just send an email to the provincial office, the provincial office of inclusive education. And they do help. But you know, the schools, you send the department the message, they will try and organize somebody to go to the office, to go to the school, to assess. They don't inform the parent will be there without the child, and the parent will again be blamed that the parent didn't bring the child. So.
Thank you, Mary. I don't know, do you want to respond, Mr. Smith?
I don't think I necessarily need to respond to this, because I think this is guidance in terms of the kind of thinking that we need to have, I think, that as a department. But maybe just to problematize the input that Ma'am is making, and that is, I think, this is typically the case with South Africa. We are told as a country, I'm talking now in broad strokes, we are told that we are good in developing policies. But when it comes to implementation, we are found wanting. So I think this is typically, as much as we can build capacity, you know, all day, all year, but when the attitudes are not in the right place, we are still going to battle. Two, for as long as people don't find within themselves, especially teachers, the reason why they need to include, instead of them thinking about 1,000 reasons why they should not include a child, all they need is just one reason why they should. So, but it's a question of attitude, it's a disjuncture between policy and practice. And I think as a country, not only basic education, these are things that we'll continue to grapple with. But we are not going to give up hope, we'll keep working. All I'm saying is, let us all put our heads together, let's work together. I think we'll be able to see where we are going. Thank you.
Thank you. On that note, let's give a big round of applause to Marish Kuman and Dr. Moses Simalani for joining us. Thank you very much.